Hey podcasters, I just wanted to take this opportunity. This is our promo before our main show. I just want to make sure that you are part of our amazing Facebook community. It is for active creative entrepreneurs and professional business owners from around the globe. It is not one of those spammy, it's all about me type of sales groups. This Facebook group, I actually created it to help build relationships, strong relationships and conversations. But more importantly, you can also plug into some of our special events and get invitations. But it's just a great, great tool. And everyone comes from a place of value, which I absolutely love and endorse. So listen, guys, if you're not already part of our Facebook community, make sure that you go to www.facebook.com. /groups/become a game changer. All right. I'll ask you for a few questions and make sure that you do that right now. Pause this audio. Okay. Go to the Facebook group and introduce yourself and look forward to seeing you in there. Take care. Bye.
This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience podcast with myself, Adam Strong. And today we have on the show James Roberts, who is, and now let me just give you a little bit of a backstory about what James is, because James was born with a congenital disability called femoral dysplasia, which is basically means that the femur bone has not grown. So it's a birth defect by trade. And we're going to be talking about some of his disability and his limiting beliefs, but he's also a former Paralympian, elite Paralympian, who's represented Great Britain on 2 occasions, which we'll talk about as well, and also represented GB at the World Championships as well on 4 occasions as well, and is now a sports performance and nutrition coach. So James, just want to say welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thanks for the introduction.
Awesome. So interesting, because I know that you've got this disability as such, right? And we interviewed a couple of Paralympians on the show as well, and you know they all have their own, I suppose, disabilities or handicaps or whatever it is that you want to call it or whatever it is. But I'd like to ask you a really interesting question. What were the struggles for you which faced you when you were having this disability when you were growing up? Well, what were the kind of struggles that you were faced with?
That's a good question. I think, Adam, for me, they seem such mundane tasks now, but I would talk of a story of just going to be able to go on the monkey bars with my friends, running up the slide. Very non-health, health and safety to now. But obviously those things I wanted to overcome because it seems so simple now as an adult, but they were a massive hurdle to overcome as a 6, 7, 8, at a push, maybe say 10, 11-year-old. And ultimately my mum was watching me in the playground one afternoon. I don't know why she happened to be there in her lunch break, but she tells me the story of me sitting on the side watching my friends and my peers playing around on the monkey bars, but you could see the cogs moving in my head as how am I going to overcome this struggle and to be able to do something that the others, the guys, are taking not for granted, but ultimately they don't have as much as the difficulties that I faced and still do to this day. They've got the use of all their limbs. So ultimately, in the space of probably 2 to 3 days, I'd accomplished getting on the monkey bars, and ultimately now, as I speak like that, that's not a difficult task. Running up the slide probably took a little bit longer, but once I did it, it was a massive accomplishment. Did I put massive amounts of holes in my clothing? I don't remember if I did, but ultimately it was a sacrifice I was willing to make.
Interesting. Because I read somewhere actually and it talks a little bit about when you were growing up as a teenager, because teenage times can be extremely challenging, especially when you're going through changes, in your body, mentality, and things like that. Was there anything that really stood out for you in your teenage years with regards to, accepting your disability?
That was probably the most testing time of my entire life, if I'm honest, because as you mentioned, it's testing times for anybody. I think especially for me, it was trying to see where I fitted in within society, social groups, high school. Because I grew up in a military environment, I was in the American school there. So it's very, if you look at films or movies, it's normally quite cliquey. You've got your jocks, you've got your geeks, etc., etc., etc. Those kind of social circles. I was kind of living in that kind of social bubble. It didn't exist in my school because there was overlaps, where it took me until my final year in high school to realize that it's like you can be smart and also sporty. Obviously, I'd learned the hard way. It was too late to really have an impact on my grades. I did pretty well anyway, but I didn't probably push the boundaries when it came to academia. I could have done a lot better than I did, but that's not a regret because that was a choice I was willing to make in terms of the sport being more the vehicle for success. But then coming back to your initial question, Adam, so I don't go off on a tangent, I think with me, the difficulty of dealing with the disability as a teenager, I think was a hard one, because ultimately in a sporting setting, I would be very comfortable to wear shorts or have the leg on show, or not even be wearing my prosthetic because I was swimming in those days. But when it came to be in the classroom, and as your American listeners and Canadian listeners, and to a certain extent, maybe the Australians that are push, don't have to wear a school uniform, so they're not deemed as the same or robotic-esque, if I use that term. I would use it as a way of masquerading it or hiding it, because, okay, I'm going to presume I'm going to be judged in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And it took probably being a little bit reflective and thinking, well, who does it impact more? Everybody else or me when it comes to overheating and, sweating and being very uncomfortable? And I thought to myself, well, I've got a problem with this and this needs to change. But that is a pretty easy and drastic change to be able to make versus maybe something more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I actually talked a little bit about some of the changes that I went through, similar to you, actually, kind of in what I call the changes, or the teenage changes, whatever it is, of losing hair to alopecia, which is interesting because we create these, I suppose, false judgments, right, of trying to compare ourselves to what society makes us up to be. But where these judgments come from is that they just are made up in our heads, aren't they?
Well, it's a story that you're telling yourself, and it's not, and I'll bring it to the table. It came apparent, and we were discussing about this with my group collective of coaches on Tuesday of this week, and he was talking about the cause and effect. So you've got obviously the facts, which nobody actually they put the story as factual, and then there's the effects after that. But obviously, if you were to write down what actually truly happened in one circle, the story that you've told yourself, like, be it, I don't know, what story after the fact has that caused, and then the effects of the story, and then obviously you can run from that. So I will probably be delving deep into my life in terms of those three, I wouldn't even know how you call those, bubbles of thought-provoking content, and kind of say, well, That's not really, that's not really the story. The fact is this, this is the story that you've taken from this event, and this is what you've done after. So there'll be some people will get some shocking truths of what I've done throughout my life to deal with things with that, because ultimately it's still probably a block that I experience in my adult life. It's like, well, ultimately I need to speak to that family member first and say, well, are you all right that I bring this to the table? And if they say yes, I'll go ahead and do it. If they say no, obviously we'll have a conversation and go a little bit, okay, why?
Sure.
And then go from there.
Interesting. Did you, it's interesting, because I've read quite a lot about your struggles and the whole kind of disability and stuff like that. How did sport, or why did you choose sport? What was it that sport attracted you to get into, I know you started off in swimming, then you made a transition into rowing, and then you made a transition into volleyball. What was it about sport that you really enjoyed, and what did it give you?
I think it goes both ways. I think because of the environment that I grew up in and the people that I surrounded myself with, it was only natural that I made that progression into sport. I think I was probably obsessed as a kid with watching it, trying to be engaged as best as I could. Obviously, I knew my limitations with the disability, so I probably used that to my advantage as I got more wise. If I don't need to put as much work in as everybody else, you can't take advantage of it for you. But I think to answer your question, how did it kind of transpire? We were always looking for sports where I could succeed or progress. The very, very first sport I did was karate, but I was probably very indisciplined and not listening. I interviewed somebody yesterday for my show, said something very similar in terms of it was too quiet. Maybe it was just too still, and then you're told not to take anything that you learn and then use it in the street. Maybe it was not as engaging, so I finished with a white belt. So that's probably the first aspect of quote unquote failure, because you would want to progress up the ranks with your dans or your belts.
Sure.
I moved on next to coming back to my point with being heavily involved around with Americans on the base. I went into 10-pin bowling, and I did that from the age of 10 till I was 13. And then I had to choose, because ultimately I couldn't do both, because we'd have swim meets on a weekend and have the bowling league on the weekend as well. So I went with swimming, and then obviously the rest is history into making the national program within GB of our development program, what it's called now, within the space of about 18 months. So it was like a very meteoric rise, but it was a coach of mine on the base who'd asked me at 15, I think I was, what's your thoughts about doing disability sport? And I was taken aback. And we were talking about this just yesterday. What was her intentions honorable, or were they like society? Why don't you put yourself in? So it's a difficult one, because ultimately, I don't know. I'm going to have to take it with a sincerity in terms of you doing it for the right reasons. And I messaged her son a couple of weeks ago to say thank you for putting me into that position. Did I know nearly 20 years on what success I would have had over that 10 years, going from being a 16-year-old till I was retired at 27? Probably not. But you've put me in a position to start the ball rolling. And like I've said, within 18 months, I was in our national setup. I had very much a supportive family. It would have been that summer of 2002, came back over here to watch the Commonwealth in Manchester. And that's kind of what really sprung up my career into fifth gear in terms of we're going somewhere. Because once the swimming session had finished, my mum went down to the bottom of the was a makeshift stand in the aquatic centre in Manchester, and shouted over, "Is there anybody there from the Welsh delegation that I could speak to?" The then head coach came across, spoke to us. Obviously, I was 16 by that time. I'd started swimming at 11. He said it was you started too late in your career. Okay. I took that personally because like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong that I don't have to start at 6, 7, 8 years old. This coach is no longer with us, but he did after dinner speeches on that story alone, that I've been the anomaly to when it came to swimming. I'm not going to take no for an answer. You said it's not possible. Okay, watch me.
I love that attitude, that can-do attitude of, it's like someone else is putting a limiting belief on you, right? Because the way that they have, I don't know, maybe trained other athletes, and they started like you mentioned at the age of 6, 7, or 8 or whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? So they've kind of created this condition, but then that condition, they've kind of rubbed them on yourself, and then you're like, and then you give them the resistance, which I kind of love that, which is kind of cool. But I want to talk about actually limiting beliefs, because did you ever create limiting beliefs, whether it be in your athletic career or, just life in general, and how did that really affect your mindset?
Ooh, that's a great question, Adam. I'm trying to think of ones inside sport, because then that would be slightly different, and it's something that's exclusive to you.
Sure.
Within sport, limiting beliefs, swimming probably, because ultimately all my coaches would say, and this is crawl or freestyle, however you want to define it.
Right.
And mine always look nice on the surface level, nice and pretty, but not very effective. So ultimately, if I would have been allowed to progress after I was dropped, which my then coach wanted to do anyway, I was a little bit hesitant anyway, because it's like, well, I've fallen by the wayside. I don't feel it right to take up your time. So he wanted to go back to basics with most of my strokes and break it down to the raw thing and then build it back up. I jumped in the pool probably the first time about 2 years ago, and I hadn't set foot in a swimming pool for at a push. We're taking a good 8 years.
Wow.
So I don't know what it was. It was because it was the day-to-day grind from the age of 11 till I was 19. I probably hated the sight of a swimming pool. But even to do anything, family orientated. It's like, no, I don't want a swimming pool at a hotel. I don't know what it was. I guess because of possible animosity towards myself, where you hadn't quite accomplished the goals that you set out. That's the first sport you did. So I won't say the Paralympics was the be all and end all, but that was kind of my aspirations once I'd made it into our development team. It's like, okay, this is a reality. I'm kind of progressing up the rungs of the ladder, and then it to be cut short and kind of cut down. It wasn't soul destroying, because it almost happened a year before. And I thought, well, unbeknownst to myself, obviously the conversations behind the scenes with my mother and our performance director at Disability Sport Wales, because I thought, I'm just going to, once I come home at Christmas in 2005 in my first year of uni, I'll be going back in the new year as a student, just like everybody else. But I'd had a phone call with him probably in the run up that last week of term, and he'd asked me, "What's your thoughts about doing rowing?" So okay, I'm interested. This is where the limiting belief actually comes in. I think.
Sure.
Is let me have a discussion with my. I've got to get permission first. I think from somebody else. So then, okay, let's go with this. So I rang up my mother, who we're very, very close with still this day, and asked her, "What's your thoughts about me doing this?" She said, "Well, and you'll like this, Adam. You can be very," and she says, she swears adamantly, she didn't say it this way. This is how I remember it. You can be very, very good or absolutely useless. But the absolutely useless I never saw as a negative. It was, okay, I can be good at this sport or I could be crap, but we'll go and do something else if that was the case. And ultimately, well, with me, that wasn't the case. It was somehow, some way, I was just a natural at that sport. I picked it up on land within the space of 15 minutes to half an hour. Like all the technical, it's not that technical versus some of the other sports I've done, but it is fairly difficult to pick up the skill of feathering the blade. Because my teammate, who I rode with for 3 seasons, couldn't pick it up straight away. But I guess when it came to, the dexterity of something like that and kind of using the kinesthetic process of learning, okay, you've shown me how to do it, let me try it. Oof. So it was kind of a very rapid rise to go and to try it, to an hour later, let's go in the water. It's like, I wasn't thinking I was going to go that quickly, but I did it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And obviously the rest is history. And that was probably my most enjoyable part of my career. I enjoyed it. Obviously very, very successful, which it helps. But that's probably the one that I missed the most of the athletic career versus maybe swimming or volleyball.
Interesting, because Annie, listening to you very attentively, it sounded to me like you really wasn't scared of trying new things, and like your mum really encouraged that, didn't she? And and there's a lot of our listeners which are a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, and some of them are scared, right, of maybe making mistakes or failing and that kind of stuff. But what I admire about you is that you've essentially taken something and thought, okay, well, maybe this isn't right for me. Let's try something new, and I admire that in people. I really do. I think it's great. Well, I was going to say to you, actually, being a double Paralympian, because you represented GB in Beijing 2008 and also London 2012, which must have been a great, I suppose, one of the greatest moments in your life, being able to represent your own country having the Olympics in your own country, right? Which is kind of a wow factor. What would you say from your perspective? What do you think are some of the success mindset hacks that you have developed in I suppose, not just transitioning from one sport to another, because that's what you've done, but what would you say is some of the things that you've developed over time that's given you this kind of, I suppose, winning mentality?
I wouldn't say they're hacks, because ultimately in sport, it's a mindset that you don't really look at the negativity. And you bringing up a point that business owners and entrepreneurs have this fear of rejection and fate. I struggled with that when I went into business, because, and I'll be honest with people, a lot of these things I have to remind myself that you've got the skill set to do this. You've tried and failed, you've tried and succeeded, and you've tried and done it anyway. So ultimately you've done all 3 and you thought nothing of it. It's like, because of, and this is where I've had to take a reality check in terms of, I've deemed that I've done it myself. That's ridiculous. I've had family, my performance director in the background, having those, even if there were subtle nudges, it's like, you can do this. I talk of a story of my swimming coach that we were talking about. Once I had made the games in Beijing, the first thing he said to me when he saw me out there was, "You've now fulfilled your potential that I saw that you had in swimming." It's like, okay. And I took that on board and ran with it in my rowing career. And ultimately nothing was good. I had the setback of obviously losing the final trial before selection for Beijing. But I had to make the ultimate decision I was kind of given an ultimatum for that. You either move up to Caversham, to the Reading area, I become full-time and you come under our guidance, or we go with the other person. So I was willing to kind of completely bin off my university, even though we're almost at the end of the year. This is about Easter time. So a lot of people are I think my family, when I told them that, they're very shocked. It's like, James, you can't do that, because what happens if you don't do it? You've got no backup. So unbeknownst to me, the behind the scenes, Sport Wales and Swansea University, where I was studying at the time, were in dialogues to, okay, what can we allow James to be able to do so we can obviously aspire to the pinnacle within Olympic or Paralympic sport. So I'm one of the very much advocates of, even marketing the university. It's no big deal. Okay, it's not the university as a whole, but it's like my sports science department that has allowed me to, a sense, up sticks and move about 100, 150 miles away from the university and do it remotely and just come back for, I think, a group presentation and my exams. And that was it. And, well, obviously the first year for my degree doesn't count anyway, but I returned that sense of dedication that had shown me, okay, I'm going to do it and show that. I think I ended with a 70% pass rate, which is the first in the first year. But I always look to give back where I can. So if there's something nostalgic that will come up, which has happened quite a lot in the last couple of days, because it's around about this time that the games would be happening, or a little bit later, okay, London, we'll share it. If I've done a feature in one of the university magazines, share it, tag them in it. And ultimately, I got sent the alumni magazine for Swansea a couple of weeks ago, and it's their centenary year. I'm featured in it. But what I did wrong is I skimmed through it. I was very excited because I've seen it, and then got annoyed I'm not in it. And I had one of my lecturers message me on LinkedIn. She got it a bit later. Oh, you're in it. A few minutes later, a classmate of mine, oh, you're in it. Okay, what page? And I felt awful. I'm thinking I passed judgment straight away because of, well, everybody's in there from Olympians to you name it. There's a few people that I'm quite surprised. I've probably not looked hard enough, but it's nice to be recognized in like 100 years of university, because there's probably like hundreds of people that they could have added in there. And then there's people that have not been in. So there's different people within society. There's even the founder of Starling Bank that I didn't know this, that we've gone to that university. There's quite a lot of different people within different industries. And they've got their own social media. I'd call it a bit like LinkedIn, but it's for the university. So I'm utilizing that to make connections as well for business purposes. Sure. But coming back to your point that you talked about hacks with mindset, I think because of it being such a positive environment, you don't really second guess your doubts. You'll be, okay, it's come up. Let me not dwell on that because I don't want it to become a reality. And I was asked, once I'd made the team for Beijing, and this was about 100 days out, and my teammate asked, but she's obviously no longer with us, she said, well, why not so excited? And this is where the pessimism comes in with the family. It's 100 days to go. Anything can go wrong. So I want to be put in the work day in, day out. And I think the only time that the excitement actually really hit in for me, Adam, was the day we were flying out. It's like, oh, it's finally come. I had a bit of an argument anyway with a family member, my uncle. And I think that's like, I'm ready to leave the UK now, and I'm ready to go to Heathrow and fly out to Beijing. But I think that's when I was really excited, was getting to the airport. It's like, well, this is a reality now.
Sure.
And in a couple of hours, I'll be in China. So that's probably when it hit home. But
nice.
The mental hacks themselves, not really. I think the support that I had around me would, I think, cultivate some of that. If I was down in the doldrums, that would be the pickup. So a lot of those things I probably had to learn after sport to be able to facilitate adversity, because I was lucky. It was never something that I had to deal with, or the rare occasion that I had to use external motivation. That was the kick up the arse. It would
Makes sense.
It was more those things that was probably more external than me creating it. But I think now that I'm in business, I can't use external motivators to motivate me, because that's me trying to use my contemporaries or comparison to get the best out of me. And ultimately, that's not going to serve you any good, because if you start comparing yourself, most of the time it's going to go the wrong way, because it'll be, well, why did I not have that success? And that everybody knows that's a downward spiral from there. And that's something I've had to learn to be more internal with my motivator. If I do compare, it will be, okay, how did they get that? Okay, let's park that. They don't exist. How do I re-engineer that back for me, from where they're at to where I'm at? And what are the things I need to implement to be able to do that? And that's probably where competition comes in. It's like, well, okay, I've liked what you've got. Now let me do the same thing and then surpass it.
Makes sense. So basically what you're saying is, get yourself a good team, surround yourself with the right people, with the right environment that's going to basically give you the platform to help you propel and move you forward for success, correct?
Yeah, that's what the saying goes: surround yourself by the 5 influential people. Be it if you want to become rich, surround yourself with richer people.
Exactly. I say it all the time to all my fellow peers and my fans out there, right? You know, surround yourself with who you become. I was going to say to you, this is I really thought about this question, and I'm hoping that you're going to give me a fantastic answer. I know you will anyway, but I'm a big believer of getting into the zone, right? And and kind of conditioning yourself, right? Whether it be in your athletic career, you must have got into the zone many times to condition yourself for an event or whatever it might be. What does the zone mean to you, and how did you practice to get into the zone?
Oof. I'll try and give you a good answer now, Adam. For me, to get into the zone in the athletic sense would probably be music was very influential, because I try and listen to it now, and you think, gosh, that's some angry music. But ultimately, that's kind of the energy you would use within sport. It's very dark, if you had to explain it to somebody outside of that environment, because you're trying to become a different persona or a different character than you might be in your day-to-day life. Ultimately, some people are very virtually they're one and the same. You know, the egotistical athletes, that probably the alpha. I won't call them alpha males. The alphas of sport. You know, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants.
Yeah.
I would say the outlier would probably be the same Bolt, because he was very charismatic, and that would be intimidating to his peers. So how can you be that relaxed and then go and produce some of these world record feats? But I think with me, to get in the zone, it would be to do music. I could, people sometimes I preferred not to be, and then to psych myself up. But I think because I came from an individual sport that was swimming, I did like the solace. And then when I came into a crew environment with rowing, I had to compromise a little bit. It's you with another individual.
Sure.
So you've got to be able to communicate better. I think once I got to my last season in the program, I probably got I was very good at that. But I was the more established figure in the boat by then, because I'd done 2006, 2007 World Championships, the Paralympics in Beijing, and that was their first. The other crew member that came in, that was their first season. So I was the senior figure, and we did have a discussion with the coach that, well, should I not go in the stroke seat because I got the experience and blah, blah, blah. But he said, well, let's use your experience a different way and do it that, and you be in the bow seat. So I obviously went to the coach to say, well, could we not try it this way to see what happens?
Sure.
Ultimately, he said no. I respected that and went about our way. We were very successful that season. I'd had my probably worst race of my career by being left on the start line to winning that race. Wow. In like a split, we'd gone from, I didn't make the mistake, so it's not so bad. She caught a massive crab, which is you don't actually connect properly with the water. Stopped the boat dead in the water, and we were left for dead. But within the space of say 200 meters, we were in the first, and we walked it the rest of the way.
Wow.
And the team manager said to us once we came off the water, I've never seen a British crew do that to a field so quickly and so ruthless. I've never been in that position, being in the shoe or being on the other foot, that a crew rode through you so easily. And it's probably soul destroying. I ended up losing to that. I'll share you. I'll tag you in a picture where I do it, because I had my arm around him. So that probably very irked him, and seeing that on social media probably motivated him, because they ended up finishing in the bronze medal at the Worlds, and we finished 5th. But with that said, obviously the person in question, she had a disability where the hip socket would dislocate. And she'd done that in the run-up to the World Champs and was out the boat for 2 months. So I'd done a lot of the training by myself. So it was very much probably hit and miss whether or not we were going to compete in 2009. So we used the rounds as to try and get better as we went through the championship. So the heats, very raw and very rough around the edges. The cohesion wasn't there. It probably like if you've thrown a scratch crew together and away you go. It wasn't as bad as that, but pretty close. Had to go through the repechage, progress into the final. And if we'd probably had another round, we'd probably have done a little bit better. So ultimately, I think halfway through the race, she said to me, I feel like my hip's going to dislocate. It actually doesn't the reverse. It clicked back in. But okay, I'm going to back off, because I want to safeguard my back for life after sport.
Sure.
But then when it came time to watching the race back on television, when we got back to the UK, it was soul destroying, because we were in the mix with the medals, and I'm thinking there was no grudges or resentment. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake! It's like I could see that we were thereabouts, like 3rd, 4th.
Sure.
But silver and gold wasn't that far away.
Sure.
Because you're told not to literally turn all the way around, because you definitely slow down the boat. And I was wearing one of these external people to look out a lot. So I'd get in trouble occasionally. If you kept your head straight, James, you'd have done a little bit better. It's like, well, I'm trying to gauge where everything is, because
sure,
periphery wise, you can't see the markers. Yes, you can see the buoys change color, but I need to know where everybody else is in retrospect of me. It's probably back to swimming days of
Sure.
you know, you always looking underwater where people are. That crew that ended up winning it caught a massive crab, and when you're at full pelt, it's even more disruptive to the boat flow. So I think if we'd have been, this is hindsight now, and I know people will gripe about it a little bit, but I think if we don't have that setback of 2 months of not being together in the run up to the World Cup, I think we capitalized on that. If that crew, the Ukrainian crew, was to make that mistake with us, and we'd have been flying like we did at the earlier season in the World Cup, it's been, thank you very much, now we're going to close the door and you need to catch us. So it'd be so it's difficult, because a lot of those things could have been avoidable. Yes, I could have probably listened to her a little bit more in training, kind of say, oh, it's not quite right, okay, let's call it a day on the water and you rest, and ultimately I would still have to done the mileage, but on the rowing machine. And I probably didn't want to do that because I hate the machine anyway, and I still do now. So I think if I was to be reflective and be a little bit wiser in my 30s than I was in my 20s, I probably would listen and say, okay, you need to come off the water. That's fine. Let's do it for the long-term game instead of the short-term. Which Paralympic sport does more than the Olympics. It's not, we're not going to flog a dead horse and push you to red line all the time. We'll do it, but we haven't got as many athletes to call upon if something goes wrong. So I probably should have listened more and maybe not been as ruthless an athlete, knowing it was my last championships and wanted to ride off on that white horse with a gold medal. That's probably the only reason I came back was, well, let's get you a medal and you've got something to show for your 4 years in the program. And probably for me, it was probably gold or bust.
But I feel like from this conversation, it's not that you put, I know a lot of athletes put a lot of pressure on themselves, right? And kind of these expectations that might not work out things to be and whatever it is. I mean, do you feel like, you know, you have this kind of unfinished business and that you'd like to kind of, I suppose, jump into a time machine and rewind the time and crack on, I suppose?
I'll say yes and no, because family did ask me a while back, and this was before the pandemic, would you do it all over again? Yeah. I was like, yes, but I would change a lot of things that I did choices wise and see what happened. Ultimately could transpire and something go worse. But no, I think this the mindset of that you talk of, Adam, I think it's trying to do that into business. It's trying to put it into, I use Donny Boylan's quote that he did for my podcast. It's just a different swimming pool. You're jumping into a different the skill sets that you can take from one to the other, unbeknown to you, a lot of them can transfer. And because of the negative perception that competition has, and a lot of people said to me that that's something that needs to go. It's like, well, no, it doesn't. It's comparison that needs to go. Competition is not a bad thing, because ultimately, if it keeps me on the straight and narrow, which sport did, and I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't do any drugs and things like that. I think as a teenager, I was very disciplined, and be it some things I maybe am too robotic, and it could almost be like it's automation, but it's me behind the scenes. Sometimes I'm definitely getting better at this. I've got to be a little bit more emotive with people. It's not creating conflict for the sake of it, to win an argument based on their health, because I deem that I'm right and you were wrong. If you're not ready to do that, that's okay. That's cool. I need to accept that. Whereas the mindset of sport that we talk about, ultimately, that's probably why some of it is there, that resistance, because I don't need to convince anybody to do that. No.
I've got, I was going to say, I've got one final question I want to ask you, actually. Sort of a really quick answer. I know that there's in us athletes, we are extremely hard on ourselves, to aspire to become better and be better. And I noticed, especially with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of our listeners, they also, some of them are extremely hard on themselves, right? And there's a common pattern or a common trait, I suppose, between the two different types of people. How important is it to celebrate your wins? And how do you celebrate?
That's an amazing question to end on, Adam. For me, it's been more of a learning curve because the athlete doesn't do it. It's okay. If I win the big thing, let's make a big deal about it. But ultimately, you don't congratulate or pat yourself on the back for, accomplishing a difficult split or a difficult training session. It's like, okay, it's part and parcel of what I do. Even if it's like a training camp. This 2-3 weeks are going to be hard. Let me take it day by day. I didn't even celebrate, overcoming some of those, and those are brutal. But I think where I've learned with having the right support within business to celebrate, even the smallest win, I still struggle a little bit with that because it's like, well, it's little, it's insignificant. Coming back to the bigger picture of sport versus this little micro dot. But I'm learning. It's like, because it gives you, that little chance to puff out your chest and I'm the big I am. Even if it's in your own house. My business mentor talks about, dancing around the house if you've signed a new client or something like that. It's going to bring you, I don't do it, but to just talk about your win to a family member or something, it brings it into reality. Oh, I've just done that. Okay. I like that experience. I want to do it again. And ultimately it makes the slog of entrepreneurship and business more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I agree. I think I struggled for many years, actually. When you just go into a zone of just do, and not looking back and thinking, I haven't really achieved anything, even if I think it's insignificant, but to others, it might be like, wow, you've kind of jumped leaps and bounds compared to where you were, type of thing. And I just kind of found that kind of fascinating. But listen, I just want to say, really enjoyed our show today, and thank you so much for today. And yeah, I mean, it's been great to have you. So I hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it and love sharing different little nuggets and some little exclusive for your audience.
Definitely. So guys, listen, what I was going to say, if you are interested, feel free to reach out to James on his social media, and you can click on James' social media on the links below. If you do connect with him on social media, just mention the Game Changers Experience podcast, just so that he knows that where you've come from, type of thing. So that would be great. And, connect with him on his website, etc. So listen, I hope that you've thoroughly enjoyed today's show as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And also the other thing I was going to mention to you guys as well, if you love our shows and you love what Game Changers Experience is all about, feel free to leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you decide to listen to this on. So have a fantastic day, week, month, year, whenever you listen to this. Have a fantastic day. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers Experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.